I never expected a simple act of kindness to change my life. It was just supposed to be another night, another walk home after a long shift, the cold night air biting at my skin. I wasn't prepared for what awaited me at the end of that dark alley. I was only trying to help. Maybe that's the problem. I didn't realize how deep I was getting into a world that didn't care about right or wrong, only power and survival. I'm Emily Taylor, and what happened next wasn't just a twist of fate, it was my life turning upside down. It all started when I heard it, a faint cry, almost like a whisper in the dark. I hesitated, standing at the entrance to the alley. The noise came again, more urgent this time, and without thinking, I took a step forward. I had never been the type to ignore someone in need. I wasn't raised that way. But as soon as I stepped into the alley, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. The shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally, and the air felt thick with tension. That's when I saw him. A man, tall, wearing a black leather jacket, his eyes hidden beneath the brim of his hat. He stood still, as if waiting for something or someone. I froze for a second, unsure of what to do. Should I turn back? Should I call for help? But my instinct told me to stay. The man took a step toward me, his movement smooth, deliberate. I could feel the weight of his presence, like a storm just waiting to break. I opened my mouth to speak, to ask if he needed help, but no words came out. He was so close now, I could see the scar running along his jawline, the coldness in his eyes. "You shouldn't have come here," he said, his voice low, almost a growl. His words sent a chill down my spine, but I didn't move. I didn't know why, but I felt compelled to stay. "I can't just leave you here," I replied, trying to sound brave, though my voice was trembling. His lips curled into a smirk, but it wasn't one of amusement. It was something darker, something that made me realize just how much danger I was in. "You're not leaving this alley," he said, taking another step forward. I tried to step back, but he was faster. He caught my wrist, his grip tight but not painful. "You're not just helping anyone," he continued, his gaze never leaving mine. "You've just walked into my world." I didn't know what he meant, but as his words sank in, I realized that I was already in too deep. His world, a world I had no place in, and yet, here I was. I couldn't escape now, and I couldn't understand why I didn't want to. The man, his name was Michael Gambino, and he wasn't just anyone. He was the Mafia boss, and in that moment, I became part of his world. My life, my peaceful little existence, was gone. From that moment on, nothing would ever be the same. The man's grip on my wrist was firm, but his touch wasn't painful. It was as if he was testing me, seeing how far I would go before I finally broke. I didn't know what I was supposed to feel. Fear? Yes, there was that, but there was something else too, something I couldn't quite place. He wasn't like the people I'd met before. His presence was magnetic, overpowering. I tried to pull my wrist away, but he didn't budge. I glanced around, but there was no one else in the alley, no one to help. The streetlights flickered above, casting an eerie glow on the scene. "You're in my world now," he repeated, his voice low yet calm. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my composure. "I don't understand," I whispered, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. His eyes softened for just a moment, almost like he was considering something. And then, as quickly as it had appeared, the softness was gone, replaced by that same cold, calculating look. "You don't have to," he said, his voice steady. "You just have to listen." I opened my mouth to speak, to tell him that I didn't want any part of this, but the words caught in my throat. He didn't give me a chance to respond. "You've seen something you shouldn't have. Now, you're involved." I felt a rush of panic. "I wasn't looking for trouble," I said, almost pleading. "I just heard someone in need. I wanted to help." Michael's gaze never wavered. "And you did," he said, his words thick with an unspoken meaning. "But now you owe me." My heart skipped a beat. "Owe you?" I asked, trying to make sense of it. "For what?" He took a step closer, his body almost brushing against mine. It was impossible not to feel the weight of his presence. "For walking into my world. For not turning away when you had the chance. That's what you owe me." I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. But something about him, something in the way he spoke, kept me rooted to the spot. I wasn't afraid for my life, not yet, but I was afraid of what this encounter would mean for everything else. I don't even know who you are, I said, my voice shaky. You'll find out soon enough, he interrupted, his tone final. He finally let go of my wrist, and I quickly pulled my hand back, rubbing the spot where his fingers had left an imprint. My mind was racing. What was this man talking about? What did he want from me? He studied me for a moment, as if weighing his next words. I'm Michael Gambino, he said, his voice smooth, every syllable sharp and deliberate. And now, I'm your business. I blinked, the shock of his words setting in. My heart pounded in my chest. This wasn't just some random stranger. This was the man whose name was whispered in dark corners, the man who ran things, the one you never crossed. And here I was, standing in front of him, caught in his world without any idea how to escape. I'm not part of your world, I said, taking a step back. He smirked, almost as if he was humoring me. You are now. His words hit me like a cold wave. I had no idea how, no idea why, but I knew he was right. From this moment on, my life was no longer mine to control. The silence between us stretched, thick and suffocating. I was standing in front of Michael Gambino, a man who was suddenly a part of my life whether I wanted him to be or not. His words echoed in my head. Now, I'm your business. I didn't know how to respond, how to react to something so final, so undeniable. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to walk away, to run as fast as I could. And never look back. But the problem was I couldn't. I wasn't just dealing with a powerful man. I was dealing with a world I didn't understand, a world that had already started to shape my fate. Michael took a step back, his dark eyes still studying me with that same cold calculation. I opened my mouth to speak, to ask what he wanted from me, but the words didn't come. You're not ready to understand all of this, he said, almost as if he could read my thoughts. His voice was calm, almost soothing, but the weight of his words lingered in the air like a storm waiting to break. I couldn't decide if I should feel relieved or more anxious. Then why am I here? I asked finally, my voice barely above a whisper. Michael smirked, a small, almost imperceptible curve of his lips. Because you're the only person who didn't run away. You stopped. And now you're involved. His words were like a trap being set, and I was too far into it to escape. I wasn't sure if I was supposed to feel honored or terrified. The way he said it made it clear that there was no going back. I had stepped into a dangerous game, and now I was a part of it whether I liked it or not. What do you want from me? I finally asked, my voice firmer this time. I had to know. I needed to understand what I was dealing with. Michael didn't answer right away. He just looked at me, his gaze unwavering, as if he was deciding how much to reveal. For now, nothing, he said at last, his voice low and deliberate. But that can change. His words were like a promise, and I wasn't sure if I was supposed to be reassured or terrified. I didn't know what nothing meant in his world, but I had a feeling it wasn't the same nothing I was used to. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. So what now? I asked, my heart racing. Michael's gaze softened just slightly. You stay out of trouble. You learn. You see things. He paused, his eyes locking with mine. And you remember, you're mine now. That's not something you can walk away from. I didn't say anything. What could I say? I didn't know what he meant or what I was supposed to do. I only knew one thing for certain. My life, as I knew it, was gone. Michael turned, his sharp, black suit brushing the edge of my shoulder as he walked past me, leaving me standing there in the alley, confused, scared, and completely uncertain of the path ahead. I didn't know how or when it happened, but somehow I had become a part of his world. And I wasn't sure if I would ever escape. The next few days passed in a blur. I couldn't stop thinking about what Michael had said to me, the way his presence had made everything feel so much more real. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but I wasn't prepared for the weight of it. I had tried to ignore it, push it out of my mind, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw his dark eyes staring back at me, unreadable, calculating. I didn't know what he wanted from me, and I didn't know how to get away from him. Each time I thought about leaving, I found myself thinking of him and what his words meant. I couldn't deny the pull, the strange connection I felt, even though everything in me screamed that I shouldn't be involved. But he had made it clear I wasn't going anywhere. The days stretched on, and the more I tried to distance myself, the more I felt his influence creeping into every corner of my life. One evening, as I was walking home from work, I found myself turning down the same alley. I hadn't meant to. It wasn't like I was seeking him out, but somehow my feet had carried me there. I stopped at the entrance, the familiar cold air filling my lungs. I looked down the alley, half expecting to see him standing there, but there was nothing. No sign of Michael. I should have turned around and gone home, but something about that alley, that moment, felt like fate. I stood there for a few seconds, my heart racing in my chest. And then, as if on cue, I heard the soft click of footsteps behind me. I didn't need to look back to know who it was. I felt the air shift, felt the weight of his presence before he even spoke. "I knew you'd come back," Michael's voice broke the silence. It was calm, steady, but there was something darker in it now. His words sent a shiver down my spine, but I couldn't move. I just stood there, frozen, unsure of what to do or say. He stepped closer, the sound of his footsteps echoing in the narrow alley. "You're still trying to run from this," he said, his tone almost soft, like he was speaking to someone who didn't quite understand. "But you can't. You're already in it." I swallowed, trying to push back the panic that was creeping up my throat. "I'm not trying to run from anything," I said, my voice shaky. "I just don't know what you want from me." Michael's eyes softened for a moment, and then he gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. "I don't want anything from you, not yet." His words were so simple, but they sent a wave of confusion through me. "Then why am I here?" I asked, unable to keep the frustration from creeping into my voice. He was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was low, like he was telling me a secret. "Because, Emily, whether you like it or not, you belong here." The words hung in the air, thick with unspoken meaning. I wanted to argue, to deny it, but I couldn't. It was like the universe had already decided for me. I wasn't just caught in Michael's world, I was a part of it. And there was no turning back. The next few days were a blur. I couldn't shake the feeling that everything in my life had shifted, and I wasn't sure if I was standing still or moving too fast. Michael's words still echoed in my mind, his voice so calm, yet there was an underlying force to them that made it impossible to ignore. "You belong here." What did he mean by that? What was I supposed to do with that information? It felt like I was caught in the undertow of a current too strong to fight. Every time I tried to push it away, it pulled me deeper into its grip. I kept expecting to wake up from this strange dream, but nothing changed. I wasn't getting away from Michael, not really. No matter how many times I told myself I could walk away, something always pulled me back. One afternoon, I was sitting in my tiny apartment, staring blankly at the wall, when there was a knock at the door. My heart skipped a beat, and before I could think, I found myself standing up and walking toward the door. When I opened it, I wasn't surprised to see Michael standing there, looking as calm and collected as ever, his presence filling the doorway like an unspoken command. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low, his eyes unreadable. I didn't know what he wanted, but I wasn't about to tell him no. I stepped aside and let him in, my mind racing with all the possible things he could say, none of them good. Michael closed the door behind him and leaned against the wall, his gaze never leaving mine. "I told you that you belong here," he began, his tone steady, but there was a shift in the air, something almost expectant. "I know you don't understand it, and I know you don't want to be here, but the truth is, Emily, you don't have a choice." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I opened my mouth to protest, but no words came out. What was I supposed to say? That I didn't want this life? That I didn't want to be tangled up in whatever world he was pulling me into? But I already knew deep down that it wasn't that simple. I wasn't getting out. And neither was he. "You're in this now," Michael continued, his voice softer, but still carrying that unshakable confidence. "And I'll be here, every step of the way. You don't have to like it, but you will learn to accept it." His words sank in slowly, as if the gravity of them was taking time to settle in my bones. I was part of something I couldn't walk away from, no matter how hard I tried. He was right about one thing. I didn't have a choice. "Why me?" I finally asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Michael looked at me for a moment, and I thought for a second that he might not answer. But then he spoke, his words measured, as though he had thought about them for a long time. Because you were the one who didn't run. You stayed. And that matters. I didn't know if it mattered to me, but it mattered to him. And that was enough to change everything. I felt trapped, caught between the life I had known and the one Michael was offering, or perhaps forcing, me into. But there was something else there, something I wasn't prepared to admit. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I wasn't sure I wanted to leave. Michael had a way of making everything feel inevitable, like this was always meant to happen. I didn't know where this would lead, but one thing was for sure, nothing was ever going to be the same again. The days after that conversation with Michael felt heavier, as if the world around me had shifted into a different gear. I tried to convince myself that I was just going through a phase, that soon everything would return to normal. But the more I tried to move away from Michael's world, the more I realized that there was no escape. It wasn't just him. It was the world he brought with him, the quiet, powerful presence that seemed to seep into everything I did. The work I had once done without thinking now felt meaningless, like I was pretending to live in a reality that wasn't really mine anymore. One afternoon, I was sitting at my desk, staring at my computer screen, trying to focus, when the phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but something inside me told me to answer. "Hello," I said, my voice still thick from a sleepless night. "Emily." Michael's voice came through the line, calm and steady. "I need you to meet someone." I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to steady myself. I didn't know why, but hearing his voice like that, so sure, so commanding, always made me feel like I was being swept along in his current. "Who?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "I'll send you the details. You'll understand when you get there," he replied. The line went silent, and for a moment, I wasn't sure if he had hung up or if he was waiting for something. But I knew there was no point in asking. I wasn't going to get any answers until I followed his instructions. I ended the call and stood up, pacing around my small apartment. I wasn't ready to meet anyone else from his world, but I didn't have a choice. There was no escaping it. As I made my way to the address Michael had sent me, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking deeper into a world I didn't belong to. The streets felt unfamiliar, more dangerous, like they were holding secrets I wasn't meant to know. The building he had directed me to was tall, made of steel and glass, standing in the heart of the city's financial district. I hesitated for a moment before entering, my pulse quickening with each step I took. Inside, the lobby was sleek and modern, but there was a coldness to it, as though it had been built to intimidate, not welcome. I approached the elevator, the soft click of my heels against the marble floor the only sound in the quiet space. As I pressed the button for the top floor, I wondered who I was going to meet. The elevator doors opened, and I stepped inside, feeling the tension rise in my chest. I didn't know what Michael wanted me to do here, but I knew it wasn't just a casual meeting. As the elevator ascended, the city stretched out below me, a sprawling sea of lights and buildings that seemed so distant, so out of reach. The higher I went, the more isolated I felt. When the doors opened, I was greeted by a man I had never seen before. He was tall, with dark hair and sharp features, dressed in a suit that looked like it cost more than my entire apartment. He didn't say a word at first, just studied me with a cool, calculating gaze, the kind of look that made me feel like I was being measured, judged. "You must be Emily," he said finally, his voice low and smooth. "Michael's told me a lot about you." I didn't know how to respond. I didn't want to know what Michael had said. I didn't want to be a part of this world, but there I was, standing in front of someone who knew everything about me, or so I thought. The man motioned for me to follow him, and I did, my heart pounding in my chest as we walked deeper into the building. I wasn't sure what was waiting for me, but I knew one thing for certain, nothing would ever be the same again. The man led me through the sleek, glass doors of the office, and I could feel the weight of the space around me. It was cold, impersonal, with sharp angles and polished surfaces that reflected my every step. The lights above me seemed too bright, too clinical. My heart was racing and my mind was spinning, but I kept my composure. I had learned by now that showing fear would get me nowhere in Michael's world. As we walked deeper into the building, the man didn't say much. His silence was almost deafening, but it didn't feel like an invitation to speak. It felt like a test. We stopped in front of a massive door at the end of the hall, and he gave it a firm knock before pushing it open. Inside, the room was large, even larger than I expected, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking view of the city. The skyline stretched out before me, bathed in the soft glow of twilight. It was beautiful, but I couldn't let myself be distracted by it. There was a man sitting behind a desk in the center of the room. He was leaning back in his chair, his fingers steepled in front of him, his expression unreadable. As soon as I entered, his eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment, everything else faded. "Emily," he said, his voice smooth and confident. "I'm glad you could make it." It was Michael. He was sitting there, calm as ever, but there was something in his gaze that sent a chill down my spine. He didn't need to say anything else. I already knew what this meeting was about. "Please take a seat," he motioned to the chair across from him, his voice still carrying that same commanding tone. I hesitated for a moment, but then I sat down, trying to appear composed, even though I felt anything but. Michael studied me for a long moment, his gaze never leaving mine. It was like he was trying to read me, to figure out what was going on in my head. "I know this all feels like a lot to take in," he said, breaking the silence, his voice still smooth and calculated. "But the truth is, you've already made your choice, Emily. You're here, and now you're part of this." I wanted to argue. I wanted to say that I hadn't chosen any of this, that I didn't want to be part of his world. But the words didn't come. Instead, I just sat there, feeling the weight of his words pressing down on me. "I didn't ask for this," I finally managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. Michael's eyes softened, just slightly, but there was no mistaking the control behind them. "No one ever does," he said, his voice almost like a whisper. "But that doesn't matter anymore. You're involved now, whether you like it or not." The words sank in, and I felt a strange, hollow emptiness inside. I had known this was coming. I had known that once I stepped into Michael's world, there was no going back. But hearing it from him, hearing the finality in his voice, made it all the more real. I wasn't sure how to respond or if I even could. So I just sat there, silently, as he continued to watch me. I didn't know where this path would lead, but one thing was clear, there was no way out. Michael had already decided my fate, and now I was trapped in his world, with no idea how to escape. Michael didn't speak again right away, but his silence was enough. The weight of his gaze on me felt like 1,000-pound pressure, as if he was waiting for me to finally accept what he had told me. I couldn't deny it anymore. I was involved in his world, whether I wanted to be or not. My mind raced, my heart beat faster, and yet I stayed still. His world. What did that mean? What kind of life was I stepping into? The idea of being involved with Michael, this mafia boss with all his power and control, was both terrifying and strangely magnetic. I knew he wasn't going to just let me walk away. But even more, I knew I didn't really want to. There was something in him, something about the way he carried himself, that made me feel alive. It made me feel like, maybe for the first time in a long time, I wasn't invisible. I wasn't just another face in a crowd. But what was it that made me feel this way? Was it the power he had, or was it something else? I didn't have answers, only questions. Michael leaned back in his chair, folding his hands in front of him as if waiting for me to speak, but I didn't know what to say. "You still have questions," he said after a long pause, his voice calm, the control in it unshakable. "I can see it in your eyes. I can see that you're trying to make sense of everything. But sometimes, there's no sense to make. You just have to accept that you're in it." I opened my mouth to protest, but he held up a hand to stop me. "I know you don't want this life. But it's yours now, Emily. And in time, you'll understand. You'll see that you're safer here than anywhere else." Safe? How could this world of power and danger possibly be safe? But I couldn't ask him that. I knew better. He wasn't going to give me the answers I was looking for. I was in too deep, and I was going to have to learn to navigate this world on my own. He pushed a folder across the desk toward me. "This is the beginning," he said, his voice still as steady as ever. You need to learn everything about this world. About the people you're now a part of. I took the folder without speaking, my hands trembling slightly. What had I gotten myself into? Michael's eyes followed my every move as I opened the folder, scanning the papers inside. There were names, numbers, locations. It was like a blueprint for a life I had never signed up for. The realization hit me again, with a sharpness that nearly took my breath away. I wasn't going back to the life I had before. It was gone. Michael had made sure of that. He had made me a part of something much bigger than myself, and there was no way out. You'll start by learning the names, the rules, the players, he said, his tone now more like that of a mentor than a boss. After that, we'll see where you fit. I didn't know what that meant either, but I wasn't about to ask. I had no choice. I couldn't back out now. I closed the folder, my mind swirling with the enormity of it all. Michael leaned forward, his gaze never leaving mine. This is your world now. You'll learn to make it your own. But know this, you'll never be alone. Not with me. The words hung in the air, final. And irreversible. He was right. I wasn't alone. But I wasn't sure if that was a comfort or a curse. The next few days felt like a blur, each moment passing in a haze of confusion and uncertainty. I tried to focus on the paperwork Michael had handed me, but my mind kept drifting back to him, to the world he had introduced me to. It wasn't a world I understood, but it was one I couldn't escape. I had already crossed a line, and now there was no turning back. The more I tried to wrap my mind around it, the more I realized that I didn't know who I was anymore. The life I had built, the quiet, normal life, felt so far away now. Every step I took, every decision I made, seemed to lead me further into Michael's world, a world of power, control, and danger. I wasn't sure how I had gotten here, but it didn't matter. I was here now, and I was learning to navigate it. That morning, Michael called me again. His voice was steady, commanding, as always. "Meet me at the usual place," he said, before hanging up. I didn't ask questions. I knew better than to question him now. I grabbed my coat and left my apartment, walking through the city like I had so many times before, but this time it felt different. There was a weight in the air, a sense of inevitability that pressed down on me, and I could feel it in every step I took. When I arrived, Michael was already there, standing by the window, looking out over the city. He didn't turn when I entered, but I could feel his gaze on me, as if he was already reading me, already deciding what to do next. "You've been doing well," he said, his voice calm. I wasn't sure what he meant by that, but I nodded anyway. "Keep it up. This is just the beginning." I wasn't sure what this was or where it was headed, but I knew one thing for sure. There was no going back now. Michael wasn't just a part of my life anymore. He had become my life in a way that I couldn't explain. Every move I made was influenced by him, by the world he had brought me into. And the more I tried to fight it, the more I realized that I didn't want to. There was a strange comfort in being a part of his world, in knowing that I wasn't alone, even if it meant giving up everything I had known before. I wasn't sure what I was becoming, but I knew that it was something I couldn't control. Michael had made it clear that this was where I belonged. And in some twisted way, I was starting to believe him. I couldn't shake the feeling that my life was on the verge of something big, something I couldn't yet understand, but something that would change everything. The power, the control, the danger.